hope everyone is having an awesome day. It's finally Friday. It feels fantastic. Alright. So, I wanted to talk to everybody about healing from toxic relationships. And if you've been a part of my Facebook page, you'll have seen, along with some other pages that I've been posting quite a bit about it. And for very good reason. Because toxic relationships and dealing with people who are toxic is something I know very well, because through experience. And when I say toxic relationship, it can be a physically abusive relationship, because it deals with the type of personality of what the person actually is doing. So, like, to give a picture in your mind of what a toxic person is, it's somebody that when they walk in the room, you instantly feel uncomfortable. They're usually in a position of power, from what I've seen. So this could be your boss, it could be your parent, it could be your spouse or your partner, it could even be a friend, somebody that holds something over you. And toxic relationships, they really take a toll. It's something where after you've dealt with it for even a few weeks, a couple months, a year, years on end, after you've dealt with this person, they kind of leave a permanent scar on your body. And it's different than normal heartbreak, because this isn't like when you leave a relationship and you're hurting afterwards, even though it was a good relationship. This is more if the person was emotionally abusive, mentally abusive, played mind games, and constantly guilt-tripped you. So, for example, a boss that uses pathos to get you to come into work, even though you don't get any overtime and you've worked over 70 hours that week. This could be a helicopter parent that's very protective of their child and overbearing and makes more demands than the child can keep up with, and then blames it on the child, not blames it on their high demands. This can be a partner who, like I said, plays mind games constantly, tricks you. So, my personal toxic relationships, the first one was a parent. It was my mother. And it was a mixture of mental issues, because she's bipolar, manic depressive, and her personality. And the best way I can describe it is the same way someone once described to me how the personality of a Pisces can go, even though she's not. But because there's two fish. Sometimes the fish is swimming up and they're fantastic, and then sometimes the fish goes way down. My mother's bipolar was like that, where one day she'd be up and she'd be happy and talkative and fun. She was the hostess with the mostest, had all the friends, things like that. And then when she dropped, she would either be in bed for days on end, except for going out with her friends, or she would be on a rampage and nothing I could do was right. And I don't mean like grades or anything like that, because grades were a part of it, but it's more, for example, if I didn't clean my sister's room, I got drugged down the hall by my hair and smacked upside the face. If, for example, there was a friend's birthday party on Saturday, and it was Monday, and I told her about it, and on top of that, with her, I had to tell her what, when, where, why, how, everything about the situation. I had to literally come up with an itinerary beforehand. Otherwise, she'd say I obviously didn't care enough to plan it out ahead of time, so I wasn't going. So I'd give her the itinerary, who was going to be there, if the parents were going to be there, how long it was going to be, all that. And throughout the week, she would say that she'd come up with 3 strikes, 3 reasons why I couldn't go. So my sister's room would be one. My sister was 9 years younger than me. So if I didn't take care of her, or if I didn't leave the chicken out to defrost, or if for some other reason she was yelling at me, and I stood there and I didn't say anything, and she didn't like the look on my face, that would be another strike. So gradually throughout the week, most of the time by Tuesday or Wednesday, I wouldn't be able to go anymore. And it was constantly like, it's your idea for me to go, and then you take it away from me, just to show that power that she would have. And it was difficult living with someone like that, because it made her very unpredictable. Because I was an accident, so was my sister. But it's also a matter of, you could sense the regret for having me. And when there's someone like that, because I was sheltered, I didn't go anywhere, except for the few times that my mother didn't flip-flop like that. Because of that, it made social situations, once I finally left home, very difficult to deal with. Like even now, I've healed quite a bit from it. It's been years since I've lived with this woman, but every now and again I'll be in the bathroom, just going to the bathroom, or I'll just be sitting there reading, and I swear I can hear her screaming for me, and I'm in trouble. I swear I can hear her upstairs screaming at me. And it's something that lingers like that, where you swear they're in the other room, and you swear you can hear their footsteps, and things like that. So because I had issues anyway with confrontation, because my mother had a habit of, if it was the slightest thing I didn't do right 5 years ago, she would go through a public place, and so this would be my school. She'd show up in the middle of choir concerts. She'd do this. We'd go to the state fair, the grocery store, and if there was something that she didn't like that I was doing, she would yell and scream at me and berate me, talk to strangers about it, like, see, look how horrible she's being, things like that. So she would do this. So it made confrontation very difficult for me. It made getting yelled at very difficult for me. So as I left home and went out into the real world, where I wasn't just talking to people through text, like hiding that I was even trying to make a friend, I didn't have to do that anymore. I had to be face to face with people. It made relationships so hard, because for the first time I had to have a fight in front of me, and that brought me into my next toxic relationship, which was an ex-boyfriend. And again, it's not toxic in the physically abusive way, it's in the mind games and the emotional abuse, because this was a person, because I was in love with him, I really was, but I would lay there, let him do whatever he wanted to me, but he would be imagining another woman's face on my body. And there's nothing like knowing you aren't what they want. There really isn't. It hurts. And it ruins your self-identity. And that's what made it toxic. And it also made it toxic with the fact that it was so hard to talk because of what had happened before. So if I needed to, for example, if I needed to say like how upset I was, tell him how I felt, I would have to write it down on a piece of paper, hand it to him, and then leave the room and go sit somewhere else until he was done reading it. Because I was brought up to not oppose what the other person said. or what they wanted. I had to listen. Or I would have to turn around in a chair, say what I wanted to say, and then turn back around. And that's stopped. Now I'm able to, tell you right to your face what the hell's going on. But because of the state of this relationship, it was so hard to talk. And that's what I mean by healing from a toxic relationship, because that's something, to get through my day-to-day life, I can't do that. I can't go to a boss and tell them I'm quitting, but turn around and say it and then turn back around. I can't do that. And I've had toxic bosses, and because these type of people are it's their personality. They're very domineering. And when you deal with something like that for years, it really sucks. So for the first part, I had to realize I had to accept it. Just like you have to accept that it happened. Because I mentioned the Three of Swords. The Three of Swords, yes, it's probably the most prominent card in tarot for heartbreak. And you can walk around with 3 swords in your chest and continue to try to live. But you're going to deal with that hurt and that pain and all the aftermath every day. So you need to acknowledge, hey, I have 3 swords in my chest. I'm hurting. In order to start taking it out. Because you can't properly heal from something if you don't acknowledge that it happened. Just like with a physical wound, if I was stabbed in the chest, I'm not going to be able to heal from it until I acknowledge, oh, that's the source of the problem. There's a knife in my chest. I need to take that out. Similar concept, but on an emotional, spiritual, and mental level. So that's the first thing. I had to accept I have issues because this happened to me. I constantly put a timer on myself in a relationship, wondering, when are you going to leave? When are you going to want somebody else? When are you going to cheat on me? Because it happens every time because of what happened to me. I think to myself, when am I going to up and leave my daughter? When am I going to want to kill myself? When am I going to want to hurt her and throw her across the room? Because of what happened to me. I put a timer on myself. And that's not healthy. But I've accepted that runs through my mind. So then the next step is realize your trigger. What makes you think that? So let's take an example. The yelling part. Yelling was a big thing. So I was in a play my junior year. I believe it was called Crossroads. I think so. It's been a bit. And I played a lawyer. The premise of the play, 3 friends go out for the guy who's driving, his birthday. They're drunk. They crash the car. Well, he crashes the car, and one of them ends up in the hospital with severe brain damage. And one girl dies. So he's put on trial because of the girl that died for murder. And I was his lawyer. So the whole time I'm defending him, as a lawyer does, innocent until proven guilty. I believe that it's not his fault. Taking a look at the crime scene, figuring out things that happened. And what happens was, there's one scene in particular, and the actor that I was partnered with, a very tall guy. So he stood a good bit above me. And I was sitting for the blocking of the scene, so I was sitting down, and he was yelling at me, "You don't understand, you're never going to understand, you don't actually give a fuck about me, da-da-da-da." And in my head, I'm like, I'm doing my lines and I'm paying attention to the scene and I'm acknowledging it, but at the same time, my body instantly started reclusing and started curling up. And I started bawling, keeping it together and finishing up the scene. And it actually really worked with the scene, because it showed I really did care. But at the same time, only reason I started doing that, because I'm like, it's my mother screaming at me again. That she's telling me I'm a piece of crap, that I'm ungrateful, that I'm horrible, things like that. So it's that trigger of, in a completely different context, someone yelling at me, but tears are streaming down my face. So it really, really sucks. But I acknowledge, okay, that's my trigger. I'm being talked down to, literally, because he's taller than me and I'm sitting. He's talking down to me, and there's yelling and screaming, and I can't do anything because it's not my time to talk. So if I notice, if I'm in a situation and I can't do anything about it, but I'm upset, I start crying. And I get upset. I start bawling even if I'm angry. The angrier I get, the less I cry. But I notice that trigger. Another trigger for me, I'm still kind of dealing with some postpartum anxiety with my daughter. And all I could imagine was my mother tried to commit suicide after my sister was born. And that was because she had postpartum depression. So I had so much anxiety of, I don't want to leave my daughter. I wouldn't want to do that. After especially some bad things that happened with my mom, my family was constantly comparing me to her. So it's constantly, am I going to end up like her? Am I going to leave my husband? Am I going to leave my daughter? I don't want to. There's too many things I want to do. So I had to deal with that. My trigger was the fact of what my mom did. And it was around the same time in my life. It was like the same time of our postpartum periods. Only difference was I talked to somebody about it. I talked to my husband and I told him how scared I was. I talked to my daughter even if she didn't understand me. I talked to our doctor and let them know I'm so scared. And things like that. Another thing would be, it's not really toxic relationship, but I got in a car wreck. I've gotten in a couple car wrecks. One because of the rain and one because a deer hit my car. The wall, and elk hit my car. And all I could think about for the longest time because of these things is like the car door opening and my daughter's car seat falling out and her getting hit by a semi or something. And so even if that's not toxic relationship, it's still a trigger for me, being in the car. So I lock the doors. I lock the doors and make sure she's in there extra tight. Every time we get out the car, I make sure to grab her and make sure she's safe with me. But that's how I deal with my trigger. I make sure it'll be okay. And that's really a big step because you have to not only acknowledge it, but figure out what is triggering you. Are you running away from the situation? Literally, do you need to get up and run because of the anxiety you feel because of something that's happened? Can you not get touched? Do you not want anybody to come up behind you and touch you because of the trauma that you've dealt with? Otherwise, it'll make you go into a panic and punch somebody. Do you just hole yourself up in your room and not talk to anybody when you're having an episode because you don't want to seem weak? Because you've been told that you were weak for having those moments. That's important. That's very important. Because it's going to help you in your healing process. Because the very last thing definitely is to talk to somebody about it. And the best person to is your friendly neighborhood tarot reader, me. And the reason why I say that is because not all the time, like if you're obviously having mental issues, then to see a health professional. But how much better does it make you feel to talk to somebody who understands, who's been there, who has dealt with having negative $200 in the bank and no food in the cabinet and yet a family to take care of, that has dealt with and sometimes continues to deal with toxicity like this. It really does help because it's someone to relate. Because the biggest problem when talking to your friends and your family, even though they're great sources, is one, they can be the source of the toxicity. And then you put your guard down and they act how they always do, and then it hurts even more. But also, a lot of the times they just say, well, you'll be okay, you'll get over it, and you don't completely understand where I'm coming from. Talking to a tarot reader about this, not only are the cards very visual, and especially an intuitive reader like myself that relates all the cards to actual moments in life, not only does that help, and it gives, a visual representation of how you are feeling, but you're talking to somebody who completely understands, who has been there, who's cried quietly in their room while no one else, to make sure that no one else hears, otherwise there'll be hell to pay, who was a parent too young from having to take care of their siblings and never got to be a child again, who deals with the stresses of every day, and it's a constant battle between am I worthy and yes, I am worthy. So that's why I encourage you to talk to me about it, because it really does help. It makes things so much more bearable. And I created a specialty reading specifically for this. Specifically for healing from a toxic relationship, because I've used it on myself. I've had to take a look at, why am I still feeling this way? Why, years later, am I still hurting? Why do they keep popping up in my mind and hurting me? So I have sat down, I figured that out, and then given myself a step-by-step process on how to heal. And that's what I want to do for you, is give you a step-by-step process on how to get better. And how to, well, not get better, but cope. Heal your spirit. Because it's like getting in a car wreck and you lose your leg. And you get phantom leg syndrome. Because just because it's physically not there anymore doesn't mean your mind and your heart don't believe don't believe that you don't have a limb. They feel it's still there. That's why spiritual and emotional healing is so important when it comes to any kind of trauma. Especially when it comes for a toxic relationship. So, I know it's a bit of a heavy one, but I hoped you enjoyed talking to me. Please let me know in the comments, how has your toxic relationship hurt you? What are you still dealing with? And talk to me, because I honestly want to help you. I want to make sure that you're okay. And I want to help you heal your spirit. So, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching.